The text message from my daughter-in-law Brenda flashed across my phone screen. "I'm quitting next week. You're going to pay our debts while I reorganize." My hands trembled as I stared at those words. 30 years of building this catering business from nothing after Thomas died, just for this entitled woman to demand. I handed over. I took a deep breath and typed back, "That's your problem." Then I glanced at the contract on my coffee table. The ink was barely dry on my signature for a consulting job in London starting Monday. Let her deal with the consequences. I never expected to be running a business at 65. When Thomas died of a heart attack at 42, I was left with an 11-year-old son, a mortgage, and barely $10,000 in savings. The small catering side business I'd been running from our kitchen became my lifeline. Those early years were brutal. I'd wake at 4 in the morning to prep food, drive Jason to school, cater small events during the day, pick him up, help with homework, then spend evenings doing bookkeeping until I collapsed into bed. Weekends meant farmers markets and working birthday parties. But with each satisfied customer, Shelia's savory celebrations grew. By the time Jason graduated high school, we had a commercial kitchen, 6 employees, and contracts with the top 3 wedding venues in Burlington. I urged him to go to college, but he insisted on joining the family business instead. "Mom, why waste money on a business degree when I can learn from the best?" he said, his father's charming smile making it hard to argue. So I taught him everything I knew, gradually giving him more responsibility. He had talent, but lacked my drive. Where I saw opportunities, he saw good enough. When Jason met Brenda at a client's wedding, I was hopeful. She was working as an event coordinator at the venue, and they bonded over a last-minute crisis involving a collapsing cake and a sobbing bride. Watching them problem-solve together, I thought maybe she'd be the perfect partner for both my son and eventually the business. Brenda was 32 then, 4 years older than Jason, with an impressively detailed resume in hospitality management. She spoke confidently about her experience with luxury hotels in Philadelphia and Boston. During our first dinner together, she asked insightful questions about my business growth strategies. I was flattered by her interest and impressed by her ambition. Their relationship progressed quickly. Within 6 months, Jason proposed with a ring that cost 3 months of his salary. I bit my tongue when they announced plans for a 200-person wedding at the Grand Lake Resort, the most expensive venue in the state. "We deserve to start our lives together somewhere special," Brenda said, showing me the $20,000 quote with champagne toasts and a 5-tier cake. Against my better judgment, I agreed to pay for the wedding. "Your father would have wanted you to have a beautiful day," I told Jason, though I suspected Thomas would have suggested investing that money in the business instead. The wedding was beautiful, but stressful. Brenda changed details constantly, upgrading elements after deposits were paid, leaving me to cover the differences. By the time they returned from their 2-week honeymoon in Hawaii, I'd spent nearly twice the original budget. Brenda joined the business 3 months later. Initially, she seemed to throw herself into learning every aspect of operations. She shadowed me at client meetings, reorganized our filing system, and suggested modernizing our booking process. I felt hopeful watching her and Jason work together, thinking perhaps I could start stepping back sooner than planned. The first warning signs were subtle. Brenda began taking credit for ideas that weren't hers during staff meetings. She'd leave early for hair appointments while others stayed to finish prep work. Small expenses appeared on the company credit card for items that never made it to the kitchen. Nothing major enough to confront her about, but enough to make me uneasy. Then came the client complaints. Mrs. Patterson, who'd ordered from us for her annual garden party for 15 years, called confused about pricing. "Brenda told me you're raising rates by 30% this year due to your premium service upgrade," she said. "But we've never discussed any changes to my usual menu." I had no idea what premium service upgrade she was talking about. When I questioned Brenda, she shrugged it off. "People are willing to pay more for quality. I'm just helping us maximize profit." This pattern continued, with Brenda making decisions without consultation. Jason seemed blind to it, always defending her. "She's bringing fresh ideas, Mom. We need to evolve." The real shock came during our monthly staff meeting. Lizette, our longest-serving employee, mentioned a conversation with a regular client. Mrs. Harrington asked about the ownership transition, Lizette said, looking confused. She said Brenda told her she'd be taking over completely next quarter and making major changes to our service model. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. I hadn't mentioned any transition plans to anyone. There must be a misunderstanding, I said evenly, though my heart was racing. No decisions about ownership have been made. Later that evening, I overheard Brenda on the phone in the office. Don't worry about Sheila, she was saying. She'll be stepping down soon. Once I'm in charge, we can make all those changes we discussed. She's from a different generation. Doesn't understand modern luxury catering. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. The betrayal stung like nothing I'd felt since losing Thomas. The next morning, I arrived at the office 2 hours early. With shaking hands, I logged into our accounting software, something I'd been doing less frequently since Brenda had taken over modernizing our financial systems. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 4 months, there had been dozens of unexplained expenses. Spa treatments labeled as vendor meetings, a $3,000 charge at Tiffany's categorized as client gifts, though I couldn't recall any clients receiving such lavish presents. Regular transfers to a PayPal account I didn't recognize. I dug deeper, pulling bank statements and cross-referencing them with our sales reports. Revenue was up slightly, which matched what Brenda had been reporting, but our profit margins had plummeted. Vendor payments were behind schedule, some by 30 days or more. This wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping. This was deliberate financial manipulation. When Brenda arrived at 9:30, carrying a $20 smoothie and wearing designer sunglasses I'd never seen before, I asked her to join me in my office. We need to discuss some financial discrepancies, I said, gesturing to the spreadsheets I'd printed out. Her expression shifted from surprise to indignation so quickly it might have been comical under different circumstances. You went through the accounts without telling me? She demanded, crossing her arms. I founded this company. I have every right to review our finances, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Would you care to explain why we've spent $4,000 at luxury retailers in the past month? Brenda's defense was immediate and practiced. Client relations. We're breaking into the luxury market. You can't attract high-end clients without presenting the right image. And the spa treatments? The weekly hair appointments? She rolled her eyes as if I were hopelessly naive. Presentation is everything in this business. You taught me that. I taught you about quality ingredients and reliable service. Not about spending company money on personal indulgences. Her face hardened. These aren't indulgences. They're investments in our future. As the next owner of this company, I need to look and act the part. The next owner? I repeated, unable to hide my shock. We've never discussed you taking ownership. Jason and I assumed it was understood. You're not getting any younger, Shelia. The business needs young energy. New vision. The conversation deteriorated from there. When Jason arrived an hour later, Brenda had called him in tears, claiming I was accusing her of theft. Mom, how could you attack Brenda like this? He demanded, pacing my office while Brenda sat sniffling in the corner. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm asking legitimate questions about company finances. Jason ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it momentarily distracted me. Brenda's been working so hard to grow the business. She deserves some trust and autonomy. Autonomy doesn't mean spending company funds without accountability. Brenda spoke up, her voice small. I've been trying to shield both of you from our difficulties. The truth is, we're under financial pressure. Jason and I have some personal debts. This was the first I'd heard of any personal financial troubles. What kind of debts? They exchanged glances before Jason answered. Credit cards mainly. And the new car loans. I'd noticed they'd both gotten new vehicles recently. A luxury SUV for Brenda and a sports car for Jason, but assumed they'd budgeted for them. How much? More uncomfortable glances. Finally, Brenda whispered, About 92,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $92,000? How is that possible? Interest rates are killer, Jason muttered, as if that explained everything. And you've been using company funds to pay your personal debts? I asked, already knowing the answer. Just temporarily, Brenda insisted. Once we take over, we'll structure things more efficiently. The business has so much untapped potential. I asked them to leave my office, needing time to process this betrayal. After they left, I called our accountant, Frank, who'd been with me for 20 years but had been gradually sidelined by Brenda. "I've been trying to reach you," he said when he heard my voice. "There are some concerning patterns in the accounts." Frank confirmed my worst fears. Beyond the personal expenses, payments to key vendors were dangerously overdue. Our line of credit was nearly maxed out, and most alarmingly, our quarterly tax payment had been missed. "Brenda assured me she'd discussed all this with you," Frank said, sounding distressed. "She said you were restructuring and temporary cash flow issues were expected." After hanging up with Frank, I sat at my desk feeling hollow. The business I'd built from nothing was being systematically drained. My son was complicit, and it seemed they expected me to simply hand over the reins while they ran it into the ground. That evening, I called Martha, my oldest friend who ran a successful catering business in London. We'd met at a culinary conference 15 years ago and stayed in touch, occasionally collaborating on international events. "Shelia, darling, what a wonderful surprise." Her familiar British accent was comforting. "Not so wonderful, I'm afraid," I said, before pouring out the whole sordid story. Martha listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What an absolute nightmare," she finally said. "What are you planning to do?" "I honestly don't know. Part of me wants to fire Brenda on the spot, but Jason would never forgive me. Another part wants to just walk away from it all." "Actually," Martha said slowly, "that second option might not be the worst idea. Not permanently, of course, but perhaps some distance would give everyone perspective." She went on to explain that her business was expanding, opening a new division focused on corporate events, and she'd been looking for an experienced consultant to help establish it. It would be for 6 months initially. We'd provide accommodation, of course. "You could be on a plane next week if you wanted." The offer was tempting. 6 months away from the drama. 6 months to clear my head and decide my next steps. "Let me think about it," I promised. The next day, I arrived at work to find Brenda in a closed-door meeting in my office. Through the glass walls, I could see she was meeting with a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. They were reviewing documents spread across my desk. When she emerged 30 minutes later, she seemed startled to see me waiting. "Shelia, I didn't expect you so early." "It's 10 o'clock, I pointed out. "Who was that?" "Just a potential client," she said, smoothing her skirt nervously. "In my office? Without me? You were busy yesterday, and he could only meet this morning. I didn't want to bother you with it." Something about her explanation felt off, but I had bigger concerns. I spent the day reviewing our client contracts and was disturbed to find several had been modified without my knowledge. Delivery terms had been changed, prices increased, and in some cases, services reduced. That evening, I received a call from Eleanor Raymond, owner of the Pleasant Valley Country Club and one of our oldest clients. "Shelia, I'm confused," she began. "I just had a meeting with a representative from Elite Catering who said they're taking over your corporate accounts next month. He showed me an email from your company confirming this arrangement." My mind raced. Elite Catering was our biggest competitor. "Eleanor, I can assure you we have not made any such arrangement." "Who did you meet with?" "A Mr. Daniels. He said he'd been in discussions with your daughter-in-law." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. The mysterious man in my office hadn't been a client at all. Brenda wasn't just mismanaging the business. She was actively trying to sell parts of it behind my back. I called Martha that night and accepted her offer. The next morning, I met with my lawyer to protect what remained of my business assets and signed the contract for the London position. 6 months away suddenly seemed like the wisest course of action. Martha's offer couldn't have come at a better time. 6 months in London, helping establish her corporate catering division, with housing provided and a generous consulting fee. It was the escape hatch I desperately needed. "You'll stay in my guest cottage," she explained during our video call. "It's small but comfortable, with a lovely garden view." The cottage looked charming in the photos she sent, with exposed beams and a tiny fireplace. So different from my sprawling colonial home with its too many empty rooms since Jason moved out. "When would you need me to start?" I asked, mentally calculating how quickly I could get my affairs in order. "The sooner the better, darling. We've just signed contracts with 3 major financial firms. Their events begin in 2 weeks." 2 weeks. It seemed both impossibly soon and not soon enough. I thought of the business I'd built, the clients who trusted me, the employees who depended on their paychecks. Could I really walk away? Even temporarily? That evening, I pulled out the photo albums I kept in the cedar chest in my home office. 30 years of business history captured in snapshots. The first tiny commercial kitchen I'd rented, barely bigger than a closet, the proud ribbon cutting at our current location. Staff Christmas parties where we'd laughed until we cried. Jason's graduation, when I'd surprised him with his own set of professional knives, engraved with his name. I lingered on the photos of Thomas. There weren't many, as he'd died before smartphones made picture-taking an hourly occurrence. His kind eyes seemed to look straight through the years, asking what I was going to do now. "I don't know," I whispered to his image. "I built all this for Jason's future, but I'm not sure he deserves it anymore." The next morning, I called my lawyer, Harold Goodwin, who'd helped me establish the business after Thomas died. "Shelia, it's been too long," he greeted me warmly. "How's the catering empire?" "That's actually why I'm calling," I said, before explaining the situation with Brenda and Jason, the financial irregularities, and my opportunity in London. Harold listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he sighed deeply. "I wish I could say I'm surprised, but family businesses often face these challenges during transition periods. What are you thinking you want to do?" "I need to protect the business," I said firmly. "But I also don't want to completely cut off Jason. Despite everything, he's still my son." Harold suggested creating a business trust with clear governance rules. You would remain the primary owner, but the trust would establish conditions for Jason and Brenda's involvement. Financial transparency requirements, performance metrics, restrictions on expenditures without approval. "Can we set it up quickly?" "I'd like to leave for London next week. We can establish the basic framework immediately. The details can be finalized while you're away." Later that day, I met with Lizette, my most trusted employee who'd been with me for 15 years. I offered her a promotion to interim operations manager while I was gone. "You'll report directly to me," I explained. "Not to Jason or Brenda." Lizette's eyes widened. "They won't like that arrangement. They're free to dislike it. But it's non-negotiable if they want to remain involved with the company." After setting things in motion with Harold and Lizette, I booked my flight to London for the following Monday, 6 days away. Just enough time to prepare the staff, reassure key clients, and pack what I'd need for 6 months abroad. I didn't tell Jason or Brenda about my plans immediately. Part of me wanted to avoid the drama that would inevitably follow. Another part, the part I wasn't proud of, wanted to see how long it would take them to notice I was making significant changes. The answer came sooner than expected. Thursday evening, as I was reviewing Harold's draft of the trust agreement, my phone chimed with a text from Brenda. "I know about the job offer in London. I'm quitting next week. You're going to pay our debts while I reorganize." I stared at the message, my hands trembling with anger. How dare she make demands after everything she'd done? And how had she found out about London? The answer came in a follow-up text. "Martha's assistant called the office looking for you. Mentioned your contract. Congratulations on abandoning the business and your family." I took several deep breaths before responding simply, "That's your problem." Then I signed the final contract Martha had emailed, confirming my start date for Monday, and forwarded it to Harold to review. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. The decision had been made. The consequences would fall where they may. For once, I wasn't going to clean up someone else's mess. The doorbell rang at 7:45 the next morning. I was barely through my first cup of coffee when I opened the door to find Jason and Brenda standing on my porch, both looking like they'd slept poorly. "We need to talk," Jason said, his voice strained. I stepped aside to let them in, noticing Brenda's red-rimmed eyes and unusually casual attire. No designer outfit today, just jeans and a rumpled blouse. "Coffee?" I offered, more out of habit than hospitality. "This isn't a social call," Brenda snapped. We settled in the living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us until Jason finally spoke. "Mom, what's this about you going to London?" "I've accepted a consulting position with Martha's company. I leave Monday." "You can't just abandon the business," Brenda interjected. "We have events scheduled, vendors to pay, staff depending on leadership. Lisette will be handling operations in my absence. All the major clients have been notified." Jason looked stunned. "You told the clients before telling us?" "I prioritized the people who haven't betrayed my trust," I replied evenly. Brenda leaned forward, her demeanor shifting to what I recognized as her negotiation pose. "Look, Sheila, I know we've had our disagreements about business direction, but walking away isn't the solution. What we need is a clear transition plan." "I'm listening." Brenda pulled a folder from her bag and removed several printed pages. "I've outlined a reorganization strategy. Jason and I would assume full management control. You would retain ownership temporarily while providing financial support to clear our current obligations." "You mean pay off your personal debts?" I clarified. She waved her hand dismissively. "The debts are a result of our commitment to elevating the company's image. Once we implement our growth strategy, the return on investment will be clear." I glanced at the papers she was attempting to hand me but didn't take them. "And what exactly would my role be in this reorganization?" "Advisory only," she said quickly. "No day-to-day involvement. Your experience is valuable, of course, but the business needs fresh direction." "Fresh direction," I repeated. "Like selling our corporate accounts to elite catering behind my back?" Jason's head snapped toward his wife. "What is she talking about?" Brenda's expression faltered momentarily before she regained her composure. "That was a preliminary discussion only. Elite made an attractive offer for the corporate division, which would allow us to focus on the more profitable wedding market, without consulting me, the owner. We were going to present the full proposal once details were finalized," she insisted. Jason looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Brenda, you told me that meeting was about a potential partnership, not selling part of the business. It's a complex arrangement," she said, placing her hand on his arm. "I didn't want to burden you with the technical details." I watched my son's face as doubt crept in, perhaps for the first time. It gave me a glimmer of hope that he wasn't completely under her influence. Brenda quickly changed tactics. "The point is, Shelia, that we have a viable plan for the future. One that requires your cooperation, not your abandonment. It seems to me your plan requires my checkbook, not my cooperation." She flushed but pressed on. "Family businesses survive through mutual support during transitions. Your mother-in-law helped you when Thomas died, didn't she?" It was a low blow. Florence had indeed loaned me money to keep afloat after Thomas died, which I'd repaid with interest within 2 years. Florence offered help. She didn't demand it after systematically undermining me. Brenda's eyes welled with tears, a performance I'd seen before in client meetings when she wasn't getting her way. "We're family, Shelia. Family supports each other through difficulties. Especially now." "What do you mean, especially now?" She exchanged glances with Jason, who nodded slightly. "I'm pregnant," she announced. 12 weeks along. You're going to be a grandmother." The revelation hit me like a punch to the stomach. A grandchild. The one thing I'd longed for since Jason married. But the timing of this announcement felt calculated, manipulative. "Congratulations," I said carefully. "That's wonderful news. So you see why we need to resolve this situation quickly," Brenda continued, seamlessly transitioning back to her demands. "The business needs to be secure for the next generation." I took a moment to collect my thoughts. processing both the pregnancy news and the blatant attempt to use it as leverage. I agree completely that the business should be secure for future generations. That's why I've established a trust to protect it. A trust? Jason looked confused. What does that mean? It means the business remains in the family, but with governance rules to ensure its stability and prevent financial mismanagement. Brenda's expression darkened. You're putting restrictions on us? After everything we've done to grow the company? After everything you've done to nearly bankrupt it? Yes. This is ridiculous, she sputtered. You can't legally do this. Actually, I can. Harold has already filed the paperwork. As sole owner, it's my right to establish succession plans that protect the business. So you're cutting us out, Jason said, looking hurt. No. I'm ensuring there's something left for you to inherit. The trust includes performance requirements. Meet them. Demonstrate responsible management. And you can earn increasing control. Brenda stood abruptly. This is your idea of family support? Treating your son like a child who needs supervision? My idea of family support doesn't include enabling financial irresponsibility. You'll regret this, she said, grabbing her purse. I have friends at the Chamber of Commerce, connections with every major venue in town. One word from me about your declining mental capacity, your inability to adapt to modern business practices, and your client list will evaporate. Brenda, Jason warned, looking alarmed at her threats. No, Jason. She needs to understand the consequences. We've been protecting her reputation while she's been stuck in the past. The community respects me. Who do you think they'll believe? A bitter old woman abandoning her business? Or the young couple trying to preserve her legacy? I remained seated, keeping my voice calm. Threats won't change my decision, Brenda. The trust is established. I'm going to London. You and Jason have choices to make about whether you want to work within the new structure or find opportunities elsewhere. Jason looked torn, his eyes moving between his wife and me. Mom, please? Can't we discuss this further? Find a compromise? I've compromised enough, I said, standing to signal the end of the conversation. The trust protects everyone's interests, including your child's. I suggest you both take some time to review the terms with Harold before making any decisions. Brenda stormed out, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. Jason lingered, looking lost. Is she right? Are you doing this because you don't trust me? The hurt in his eyes nearly broke my resolve. I'm doing this because I love you, and because the business deserves better than what's happened recently. This isn't punishment, Jason. It's a chance to prove yourself, without the safety net of Mom cleaning up every mess. He nodded slowly, though I could see he wasn't fully convinced. And the baby? Will you at least reconsider London? Your grandchild will be born while you're gone. I'll be back for the birth, I promised. But this time away is necessary, for all of us. After he left, I sat alone in my living room, replaying the confrontation. Brenda's pregnancy announcement was clearly intended to derail my plans, to re-establish emotional control. Years ago, it might have worked, but not today. Not after everything that had happened. I picked up my phone and called Harold. I need to accelerate the trust arrangements, I told him, and add additional security measures. I think we're in for a bumpy ride. The weekend passed in a blur of preparations. I finished packing, arranged for my neighbor to check on the house, and met with Lizette to go over final operational details. Jason called twice but didn't leave messages. Brenda remained ominously silent. Monday morning, 3 days before my departure, I arrived at the office to find Lizette waiting anxiously by the door. Mrs. Harrington called first thing, she said, following me into my office. She was very upset. Eleanor Harrington was one of our oldest clients, hosting monthly executive lunches at her real estate firm for over a decade. What happened? Someone called her yesterday claiming to be from your doctor's office, expressing concern about your recent episodes and suggesting she might want to review her catering contract given your condition. I sank into my chair, stunned by this new low. Did she say who called? No, but she recognized Brenda's voice. They play tennis at the same club. I immediately called Eleanor to apologize and explain that I was in perfect health, but facing some family business challenges. She was understanding, but concerned. This isn't the first odd call I've received, Shelia. Last week, someone left a message saying your company was having supply chain issues and might not meet commitments for our upcoming events. By noon, I'd heard from 3 more clients with similar stories. Each had received concerning calls about my health, the business's stability, or quality issues with recent events. All were considering canceling their contracts. I spent the day making personal visits to our top 10 clients, reassuring them and explaining that I would be working abroad temporarily, but the business would continue operating smoothly under Lizette's management. Most were relieved to hear directly from me, though some remained wary. Tuesday brought a new crisis. Our primary meat supplier called to report that someone claiming to be me had canceled our standing order and requested a refund of our deposit for next month's events. I knew something wasn't right, he said. We've been doing business for 20 years. You'd never cancel by email without a phone call. I thanked him for his caution and immediately checked with our other vendors. 3 more reported similar cancellation requests, all supposedly from me. Brenda was systematically trying to disrupt our supply chain, potentially leaving us unable to fulfill upcoming contracts. That afternoon, I implemented new verification protocols with all vendors, requiring phone confirmation for any order changes and establishing passwords for account access. It was time-consuming but necessary damage control. As I was leaving the office that evening, exhausted from firefighting, Jason appeared in the parking lot. He looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes and rumpled clothes. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Alone, we drove separately to a small coffee shop across town, away from the office and any potential eavesdroppers. Jason ordered black coffee but just stared into the cup after it arrived. "I didn't know," he finally said, "about the calls to clients, the vendor cancellations. I swear. But you know now," I observed. He nodded miserably. "Brenda says it's justified. That you've left us no choice but to take control of the narrative." "The narrative? Is that what we're calling slander and sabotage now?" "She says we need to protect our future. That you've never given her a fair chance to prove herself." I studied my son's face, the little boy I'd raised now lost in a man I barely recognized. "What do you think, Jason?" "Not Brenda. You." He looked up, surprised by the question. "I think," he started, then faltered. "I don't know what to think anymore. Everything's happening so fast." For the first time in months, I saw a glimpse of my real son. Not the puppet Brenda had been manipulating. "Do you remember when you were 14 and crashed your bike trying that jump behind the Petersons' barn?" He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Broke my arm in 2 places. You were so scared to tell me because you'd taken my car without permission to get there. You grounded me for a month. But I still took care of you. Got you to the hospital, made sure you healed properly. What's your point, Mom?" "My point is that consequences and care aren't mutually exclusive. I can love you while still letting you face the results of your choices." His eyes welled with tears. "I never meant for things to get this bad. It just happened so gradually. A little debt here, a missed payment there. Then suddenly we were in over our heads, and Brenda was saying you'd bail us out because that's what family does." "Is that what happened with her parents' business too?" I asked, remembering the rumors I'd heard around town but dismissed. Jason's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "The craft brewery in Philadelphia that went under a few years ago. It was owned by her parents, wasn't it?" "How did you know about that?" "Brenda said they retired early. I'd made some calls to contacts in Philadelphia after Brenda's threats, digging into her background more thoroughly than I had when she and Jason first got together. What I'd discovered was troubling. They didn't retire, Jason. The business filed for bankruptcy after a series of financial irregularities. Your wife was their business manager for the 2 years leading up to the collapse." He shook his head in denial. "That can't be right. She said the business was bought out by a larger brewery. It was sold at auction to cover debts. Her parents now live in a small apartment in Florida, not the waterfront condo she's mentioned." Jason looked physically ill. Why would she lie about that? I think you need to ask her that question, along with whether she's actually pregnant. His face flushed with anger. That's too far, Mom. I know you're upset, but questioning the pregnancy is crossing a line. I reached across the table and took his hand. Has she seen a doctor? Have you gone to any appointments? Seen any test results or ultrasounds? She's been waiting until the first trimester was over. It's bad luck to announce before then. Jason, think carefully. The timing of her announcement, right when she needed leverage against me leaving. Doesn't that seem convenient? He pulled his hand away. I can't listen to this. You've always been suspicious of her, never given her a real chance. I gave her access to the business I built over 30 years. I trusted her with client relationships I've nurtured for decades. I paid for a wedding that cost more than my first house. What more of a chance should I have given her? We sat in tense silence, the gulf between us feeling wider than ever. I should go, he finally said. Brenda will be wondering where I am. Before you do, there's something you should know. I've filed a police report about the fraudulent cancellations and the calls to clients. If it continues, there will be legal consequences. I don't want to see either of you facing those, but I will protect the business. You'd press charges against your own family? He asked, sounding wounded. This isn't about family, Jason. It's about right and wrong, about actions and consequences. As he stood to leave, I asked one more question. Do you even want the business, Jason? Not as Brenda's puppet, but for yourself? Have you ever wanted it? Or did you just join because it was the path of least resistance? He paused, looking suddenly lost. I don't know anymore, he admitted quietly. I thought I did. After he left, I sat alone with my cooling tea, wondering if I'd reached him at all or just pushed him further away. Either way, I'd said what needed to be said. The rest was up to him. Wednesday dawned bright and clear, my last day in Vermont before the early morning flight to London. I'd planned to spend it at home, double-checking my luggage and tying up loose ends. Instead, I received a frantic call from Lizette at 6:30. Someone broke into the kitchen overnight, she said, her voice shaking. The main refrigerator is empty, and half our equipment is gone. I dressed quickly and drove to the commercial kitchen we'd operated from for the past 15 years. The back door showed signs of forced entry, though the alarm hadn't triggered. Inside, the devastation was worse than I'd imagined. Not only was food missing, but also our most expensive equipment, the commercial mixer, specialty knives, the new espresso machine for coffee service, and the engraved serving pieces we used for high-end events. Officer Wilson from the local police department was already taking Lizette's statement when I arrived. I'd known Dave Wilson for years. His department had hired us for their annual fundraiser since he was a rookie. Security footage shows 4 individuals entering around 2 a.m., he explained, showing me images on his tablet. The quality was poor, but one figure was unmistakably Brenda, directing 3 men as they loaded equipment into a van. Do you recognize the others? Dave asked. One was vaguely familiar, a server we'd hired for occasional large events. The others were strangers to me. I need to file charges, I said, my voice steady despite the rage and heartbreak churning inside me. Are you sure? Dave asked gently. That's your daughter-in-law. I'm sure. While Dave processed the paperwork, I took inventory of what remained and what we'd need to replace immediately. We had a wedding for 200 people scheduled for Saturday. Even with me leaving, I couldn't abandon Lizette to handle this crisis alone. I called Martha to explain the situation. I might need to delay my arrival by a few days, I told her apologetically. Take whatever time you need, she assured me. The cottage isn't going anywhere. By noon, I'd arranged emergency equipment rentals and placed rush orders with our suppliers to replace the stolen food. The cost was substantial, but preserving our reputation was worth it. As I was reviewing the revised production schedule with Lizette, Jason burst into the kitchen, looking frantic. Is it true? He demanded. Did you file charges against Brenda? Yes. They took her away in a police car, Mom, in handcuffs, in front of our neighbors. She stole thousands of dollars worth of equipment and food, Jason. There are consequences for those actions. She's your family. Family doesn't sabotage each other. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie and manipulate to get what they want. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made my heart ache despite everything. What am I supposed to do now? That depends on what you want, Jason. If you want to continue bailing out someone who's systematically tried to destroy everything I've built, that's your choice. But don't expect me to fund it or enable it any longer. He sank onto a kitchen stool, looking utterly defeated. She told me she was just moving some equipment to our garage temporarily, for safekeeping while you were gone. And you believed that? I wanted to, he admitted. It was easier than facing the truth. I softened slightly, seeing his genuine distress. The truth being, that she's been using me. Using us. That everything she's told me might be a lie. He looked up, his eyes red. I called her OBGYN this morning. They've never heard of her. So my suspicion about the pregnancy had been correct. Another manipulation tactic in Brenda's arsenal. I'm sorry, Jason. He shook his head. Don't be. You tried to warn me. I wouldn't listen. We worked side by side for the next several hours, salvaging what we could of the week's preparations. Jason called in favors from industry friends, securing loaner equipment to replace what had been stolen. It was the hardest I'd seen him work in years, perhaps ever. Late that afternoon, my phone rang with a call from the Grand Hotel, our largest client. They were hosting a retirement gala for a prominent local judge on Friday night, an event for 300 people that we'd spent months planning. Mrs. Thompson, this is Charles Bennett. The hotel manager's tense voice came through the line. We have a situation regarding Friday's event. Apparently, someone claiming to be my assistant had called that morning to cancel the catering, citing a family emergency. The hotel was in panic mode, trying to find a replacement with less than 48 hours' notice. The event is absolutely still on, Charles, I assured him. We've had some attempted sabotage from a disgruntled former employee. I'll be there personally to oversee everything. But I thought you were leaving the country tomorrow? I closed my eyes briefly, seeing my carefully laid escape plan crumbling. My plans have changed. The event is too important to leave to chance. After hanging up, I turned to find Jason watching me intently. You're postponing London, he stated. Just for a few days. Until we get through this crisis. You don't have to do that. I can handle the Grand Hotel event. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. I know I haven't given you reason to trust me lately, he acknowledged. But I need to start fixing what I've broken. Let me prove I can do this. I studied my son's face, searching for any trace of the entitlement or carelessness I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Instead, I found only determination and regret. The judge is an old friend, I said slowly. If anything goes wrong, it won't. I'll make sure of it. Against my better judgment, I nodded. All right. But I'll be checking in constantly, and Lizette will be reporting directly to me. His relief was palpable. Thank you for the chance. As we finalized plans for the emergency reorganization of our schedule, Lizette appeared with more news. Brenda's been released on bail. Her parents posted it. Her parents? Jason and I asked simultaneously. They flew in from Florida this morning. So they weren't estranged after all, despite the bankruptcy situation. Interesting. That evening, as I repacked my suitcase for a Saturday departure instead of Thursday, Jason called again. I went to the house to get some clothes, he said, his voice odd. Brenda wasn't there, but I found something you should see. Can I come over? 20 minutes later, he arrived with a folder full of documents. Loan applications with my forged signature, emails to clients announcing a transition in ownership, and most disturbingly, a draft press release dated for next week announcing my retirement due to health concerns. She was planning to force you out completely, Jason said, looking ill. Whether you went to London or not, and these loan applications would have left me personally liable for hundreds of thousands in debt, I added, scanning the paperwork. There's more, Jason said hesitantly. I found a pregnancy test in the trash. It's negative. The final confirmation of what I'd suspected. The pregnancy announcement had been a complete fabrication, a last-ditch effort to manipulate both of us. Jason's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Brenda, which he declined. "I've asked her to move out," he said quietly. "I told her I know about the test, about everything. She said I'd regret taking your side. And will you?" He shook his head firmly. "No. I've spent too long letting her make my decisions. It stops now." For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt a glimmer of hope for my son's future. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least he was finally on the right path. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we rebuild. The business, our relationship, your independence, one step at a time." My London departure was delayed twice more. First for the police investigation into the equipment theft, then for a meeting with the bank to address the fraudulent loan applications. By the time I finally boarded the plane 10 days later, the worst of the crisis had passed. Brenda was facing multiple charges, including theft, fraud, and criminal impersonation. Her parents had hired an expensive lawyer who was pushing for a plea deal, but the prosecutor seemed disinclined to offer one given the scale and premeditation of her actions. Jason had moved back to his old apartment above the garage at my house temporarily, an arrangement that felt strangely right for this period of transition. He'd successfully managed the judge's retirement gala, earning praise from the client and demonstrating a level of commitment I hadn't seen from him in years. "Call me when you land," he said at the airport drop-off, hugging me tightly. "And FaceTime tomorrow so you can show me the cottage." "I will," I promised. "You're sure you'll be okay?" "I'm not okay yet," he admitted candidly. "But I will be. And so will the business." The flight across the Atlantic gave me time to reflect on everything that had happened. The betrayal still stung, but it was tempered now by hope. Perhaps this crisis had been necessary, forcing issues to the surface that might otherwise have festered indefinitely. Martha met me at Heathrow, her familiar face a welcome sight after the emotional turbulence of the past weeks. "You look exhausted, darling," she said, embracing me warmly. "It's been a challenging time. Well, you're here now. 6 months of London air will do you good." The guest cottage was even more charming than the photos had suggested, with a small garden bursting with early summer flowers and a kitchen stocked with welcome essentials. It felt like the perfect sanctuary to heal and rediscover myself away from the drama. The consulting work proved to be exactly what I needed, challenging enough to keep my mind engaged but structured in a way that allowed for personal time too. I spent my days helping Martha's team establish systems for their new corporate division, drawing on my decades of experience while learning new approaches from their predominantly younger staff. Evenings and weekends were my own. I explored London's neighborhoods, visited museums, and took day trips to nearby towns. For the first time in 30 years, I had no one to answer to but myself. Jason and I video called several times a week. Initially, our conversations focused mainly on business updates and the ongoing legal proceedings with Brenda. But gradually, they evolved into deeper discussions about his goals, my experiences in London, and the nature of our relationship. "I've been thinking about what you asked me," he said one evening, about a month into my stay, about whether I really want the business for myself or just fell into it. And I do want it, but not exactly as it is now. I've been researching culinary schools with business programs. I think I need formal training if I'm going to do this right. It was the most independent thinking I'd heard from him in years. "That sounds like a good plan. It would mean stepping back from day-to-day operations for a while," he continued. "Maybe Lizette could continue as manager until I finish? If that's what you want, we can make it work." His expression turned serious. "I want to earn this, Mom. Really earn it. Not just have it handed to me because I'm your son." Those words meant more to me than he could know. 3 months into my London stay, I received news that Brenda had accepted a plea deal, avoiding jail time but accepting felony charges that would remain on her record. She would be required to pay restitution and perform community service. Jason filed for divorce the same week, a painful but necessary step toward his fresh start. Around the same time, I got an unexpected call from Eleanor Harrington. "We miss your personal touch, Sheila," she said. The team is doing well, but it's not the same without you. When are you coming home? Similar calls followed from other longtime clients. It was gratifying to be missed, to know that the relationships I'd built over decades still mattered. Maybe you should consider splitting your time, Martha suggested over dinner when I mentioned these calls. 6 months in Vermont, 6 months in London. My offer of consulting work stands indefinitely. The idea was appealing. I loved my new London life, but Vermont was still home. And despite everything, I wanted to be present to support Jason through his transformation. When I returned for a visit at the 3-month mark, I found both the business and my son in remarkably improved states. Lizette had maintained our client base beautifully. Jason had enrolled in a culinary business program and was working part-time in the kitchen, relearning the fundamentals. I started at the bottom, he explained as he chopped vegetables with newfound precision. No special treatment. The staff resented me at first, but I think they're coming around. The business trust Harold had established was working well, providing necessary oversight while allowing Jason to gradually earn more responsibility. The final divorce proceedings with Brenda were underway, with minimal contact between them now that she'd moved to another state. "How does it feel to be back?" Jason asked as we shared dinner on my back porch. "Good. Different. I miss London already, but this is still home. Would you consider doing both? Maybe part-time in each place?" I smiled at how closely his thinking aligned with what Martha and I had discussed. Actually, I've been considering exactly that. Over the next week, we developed a plan. I would return to London to complete my 6-month commitment, then establish a pattern of splitting my time between both places. Jason would continue his education while working under Lizette's supervision. The trust would remain in place, with benchmarks for Jason to achieve greater control as he demonstrated responsibility. During my final evening before returning to London, Jason broached a subject we'd both been avoiding. "I'm sorry, Mom. For everything. For not seeing Brenda clearly. For taking you for granted. For nearly destroying what you built. I know you are. How did you do it? Start over after Dad died. Build something from nothing. Keep going through all the hard times?" I thought carefully before answering. One day at a time. Sometimes 1 hour at a time. And by remembering that setbacks aren't failures unless you let them stop you. He nodded thoughtfully. "I won't let this stop me or define me. I know you won't. You're stronger than you realize, Jason. You always have been." When I returned to London the next day, it was with a lighter heart. The crisis that had nearly destroyed my business and family had ultimately led to something better. Not perfect, not without pain, but healthier and more honest. Over the next 3 months, Jason continued to grow in both skills and confidence. By the time I returned to Vermont permanently, he had completed half his culinary business program and earned the respect of both staff and clients through consistent hard work. The bi-continental arrangement Martha and I established worked beautifully. 6 months in Vermont, running the business alongside Jason and mentoring him as he earned increasing responsibility. 6 months in London, consulting for Martha while enjoying the freedom of a life unencumbered by daily business demands. A year after Brenda's dramatic text message demanding I pay their debts while she reorganized, I sat with Jason in the office that had once been solely mine but now contained 2 desks. "The trust review is next week," I reminded him. "Are you ready?" He nodded confidently. "All the benchmarks have been met or exceeded. Revenue is up 17%, staff retention is at an all-time high, and client satisfaction scores have never been better. Harold will be impressed." "I don't just want to impress Harold," he admitted. "I want to make you proud." "You already have," I told him, meaning it completely. Sometimes the most painful events in our lives turn out to be necessary catalysts for growth. Brenda's betrayal and attempted takeover had forced both Jason and me to confront uncomfortable truths we might otherwise have avoided indefinitely. The business was stronger now. Our relationship was healthier. And I had discovered that life could hold new adventures, even in my 60s. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments when I'd questioned everything. when the betrayal had felt too painful to bear. But by refusing to let others dictate my worth or manipulate my choices, I had found a path forward that honored both my life's work and my need for personal fulfillment. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for those who need to learn to stand on their own. The greatest gift I gave Jason wasn't the business itself, but the chance to earn it honestly and value it properly. And the greatest gift I gave myself was the courage to start a new chapter when I could easily have remained trapped in old patterns of rescuing, enabling, and sacrificing my own needs for others. As I look forward to my next London season, I feel grateful for the crisis that forced me to grow. Sometimes the text message that seems like a disaster is actually the beginning of your liberation. You just have to be brave enough to reply, "That's your problem," and then do what's right for you. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? How did you find the strength to stand your ground while still maintaining compassion? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might be struggling with similar family business challenges. Thank you for listening, and remember that it's never too late to reclaim your power and create the life you deserve.